This case does not have a lot of information online. In fact, the murderer in this case, there's no photos of them even online. The victim, there's no photo online. There's essentially nothing. It's very strange to me because this happened in 1993, but it's almost as though this case is just completely lost in time. But I've never forgotten it. So this starts around like Fresno, San Francisco. I really only have the county name, so I'm a little hazy there. But this was in 1993. Oh, God. Oh my God, chat. Here we go. Am I going to cry today? I'm going to cry today. So this story starts with a woman named Caroline Young. I'm telling you, this one is so weird. No Googlers, but good luck. Good luck finding almost anything. But don't. I got you. Caroline is the mother of a 25-year-old woman named Vanessa Torres. Caroline's about 51, Vanessa 25, and Vanessa Torres has 2 children, Darren Torres and Daishia Torres, okay? And Vanessa she wasn't doing so hot. Vanessa had multiple arrests for drugs, prostitution. She was an addict and pretty quickly got her children taken away, the 6-year-old and the 4-year-old. And the courts deemed her an unfit mother, and instead they gave custody of these 2 children to the grandmother, 51-year-old Caroline Young. So she had custody of the children ever since they were infants. Since they were basically newborns. Vanessa could not take care of these children, and the children had 2 different fathers that were not in the picture. But one thing to note is that Caroline liked that. She didn't want the men to be in the picture. She did not want these fathers to have any kind of connection with their children. She would tell them things about their dad. She would tell the neighbors and the friends and all of this. And so by basically on the dads, Caroline creates this identity of, I am the grandmother. I am a savior. I am the sweet, wonderful grandmother that has saved these children from my daughter who's a drug addict and these deadbeat dads that are never coming around. I am Caroline. And she's always taking care of the kids. They lived with her. And also, she's not married, you know? She this is all she's doing all day, every day. She's got the time and she's got the drive to raise these children. Through all of this, like I said, she's not really doing a whole lot with her life. And on top of that, she's not really working, okay? And she does get some money from the state, but eventually Caroline decides to file for child support from Darren Torres's father. Remember when I told you guys that Caroline had spun up all these stories about, your dad's not around, your dad doesn't want to be here, your dad doesn't, sorry, it's just me. Caroline also started to believe this narrative about Darren's father, Bruce. Darren's father, Bruce, was an active Marine. He was a Marine recruiter. And at one point, he ends up getting served this back pay bill for child support. And it's $12,000. And he's like, what the is this? And they're like, this is for your son, Darren. And he's like, Darren? Where's my son? This is something that no one ever expected because Caroline said that Bruce didn't care about his son. He was just gone. He was out living in Virginia and he was done. Like he had moved on, right? And so then because this was through the state, Bruce starts to he's like, where's my son? I want my son. And everyone's kind of like surprised because it's like, wait, I thought you didn't want the kid. And he's like, who the said that? And this is when Caroline realizes she's made a mistake because Bruce wants his child back. Now, Bruce was in his late 20s. He had never been married to Vanessa Torres before. They had a child out of wedlock, but now he's back in his state. He's working. He's got a good job. He's in the military. He's married, and he and his wife just had a son, and they are ready to welcome their 6-year-old child back into the home. This kind of says a whole lot about Caroline and how it was all about her. It wasn't about the children. I'm going to share a very personal story and personal anecdote for a minute. But I want you guys to think about this. Caroline spent many years telling Darren that Bruce did not want him. That is one of the most damaging things that you can ever say to a child. If you guys have ever had a time where you felt like your parents loosely implied, like, oh, you weren't planned or something, for some reason it just hurts, you know, especially as a kid. So imagine as a 6-year-old having a beat in that your father left you, your mom is incompetent. You as a child are going to start to think, what's wrong with me? And I personally feel this because when I was a kid, my mom was super, super like nice about my dad. She didn't tell me too much about him, but my dad wasn't in the picture. And I always was like, where's my dad? I want to see my dad. And he would always promise to come and visit, and he wouldn't show up. And so as a child, I rationalized this as best as I could in my head. And I was like, there's something wrong with me. My father doesn't want to see me. I'm the problem. He doesn't like me. And this is the story that I created in my head for over 20 years. I think to an extent, I created this kind of victimized prison for myself that, you know, somebody didn't want me. And I feel like Darren definitely could have built that too. And it was not true. And it wasn't until I was 26 or 27 years old that I found out my dad had a warrant for his arrest in the city that I lived in. And so it wasn't that my father didn't want to see me. He was scared that he was going to get caught and sent to jail if he was seen around that city. And no one ever told me that. So the story that I created as a child was not real. And now for Darren, Caroline creating this story in his head is going to change his entire perspective of life. And she did not care. She didn't care. It was all about making her the savior, regardless of how that made Darren feel about himself. When I read in here that Bruce was so excited to see his son, like I felt that shit, man, and he is gonna go and get him. So the cool thing about this is that, like I said, Bruce is in the military. He has access to resources, attorneys. He knows the proper way to get his son back. He's got counsel. He's got friends that support him, everything. He's gonna get this kid back, and Caroline knows that. When Caroline Young realizes that the clock is ticking, she has no rights to these children, none at all. And Bruce is coming to take Darren. Now, the daughter is probably still going to be there. But like I said, Caroline's identity was attached to these children. They gave her a purpose. She was now the loving, doting grandma. And if you take Darren out of that equation, she feels like she's lost some of her identity, lost some of her ego. You have removed a little bit from her. But Bruce is coming to get that child. And so when Caroline doesn't know what to do anymore, she starts making some really outlandish threats. She starts to tell people, if he comes down here for Darren, I will kill the children. She tells another person, I will kill the children and take them to hell with me. This is the first part of the problem I have with this story. There is no tone or inflection. In fact, let's run through 3. There is no tone or inflection where you can say that phrase and I'm not calling the cops. I want you guys to think about that. Somebody comes up to you, a 51-year-old woman, and she says, I'll give you 3, okay? And she says, if he comes here to take the kids, I'm going to kill the children. That's 1, right? Let's do number 2. You know, if he comes here to take the kids, I will kill them. I'll kill them and take them to hell with me. What would even 3 be? Like, I just did it in like a jovial tone, and that is still... People don't say that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't say that. And if you guys ever hear anything like that, you have to call somebody. You have to. There is no reason to ever have that come out of your mouth. Ever. There are so many reports of her making these threats because of how angry she was. Her saying, I will kill the children and take them to hell with me is terrifying. After a while, Bruce wins custody of the child. He gets custody for Darren. Like I said, guys, he's in the military. He's in good standing. He just had a son. You know, he's got his wife. This is perfect. Just send the child over there. Bruce has won. And I think that's kind of how it felt in Caroline's eyes. This was a battle of the egos for her, but for Bruce, this was just, I'm getting my son back. He has won the court case. He has won his child. And on June 18th, 1993, he goes to pick up his son. He goes to pick up his son, and it was a Friday. And it was early in the morning, and Caroline had made a lot of comments. She made a lot of comments before this Friday. And one of them that was very terrifying was she said very calmly, "The children will not be separated." And that's what she kept telling Vanessa. But nobody knew what that meant. Bruce had already won the case. And the children were to be separated. The girl would stay there at the house, and Darren would go back with his dad. The day before this, Caroline very calmly said, "The children will not be separated." And so on that Friday morning, the day that he was supposed to come and pick him up, Caroline Young went into the kitchen and she took out a large butcher knife. You guys know roughly what essentially is going to happen in the next few moments. But I want to say this. A knife is incredibly personal. There is blood. There is an extreme amount of effort. It is one of the most violent ways to kill someone. And so Caroline's weapon of choice, to me, shows just how angry she was. And so that morning, she grabbed the knife and she wrote a note. And the note was for Bruce, Darren's father. And that was found at the scene of the crime. I'll tell you guys that note after this. And Caroline went into the bedroom of the 6-year-old child and the 4-year-old child. She walked right up to Darren Torres while he was sleeping in his bed. And with that knife and with a swift motion, she cut the child's throat. She slit his throat in his own bed. And that was it. And Darren was gone. And after that, Caroline decided to smoke a cigarette. She brought the pack in the room, lighter and all, while the child lay bleeding out in the bed. And this part's a little hazy, but it's almost suspected that Caroline woke up Vanessa at this point, or called out to her, maybe because she wanted Vanessa to see just how serious she was about every threat she made this week. And Vanessa Torres walks into that bedroom and she sees her mother covered in blood, smoking a cigarette, and her child bleeding out in his own bed. And when Vanessa Torres cries out to her mom, seeing this sight, "Why did you do this? What are you doing?" Caroline Young yells out, "The children will not be separated." And she walks over to the girl and she stabs her in the chest and then slits her throat as well while she was still sleeping. She had no idea what was going on until the knife pierced her chest and she was looking up at her grandmother. Before I tell you guys what happens next, I just want to mention Vanessa Torres was basically condemned for being a prostitute and being a drug addict. But this is the caliber of the woman Vanessa was raised by. They were close all throughout her childhood and up until this moment. And this is the sight that her mother put on her. Can you imagine that, walking into a room and seeing both of your children being slain while your mother's wearing a nightgown, smoking a cigarette covered in the blood of her own children? But oh my fucking God, this piece of shit isn't done yet. Vanessa Torres freaking out, obviously, because you can kill my children. I don't know what you're gonna do to me next. She gets the phone and she's dialing 911 and screaming as Caroline Young is stabbing her child to death. And afterwards, she drops her cigarette and she looks Vanessa in the eyes and she stabs herself in the stomach and pulls the knife all the way across her body and attempts to disembowel herself in front of her own daughter. That's why I said this is how Vanessa Torres turned out this way, because Caroline Young was her mother. And this was the trauma that she intended to leave on her before Caroline left this earth. The police arrive on the scene, and here she is, stomach wide open, while the children are dead in their bed. And guess what? The bitch still alive. She tried to stab herself in the stomach to death. I mean, guys, come on. That's not gonna work. She tried to stab herself in the stomach multiple times, just piercing random things. And then when she tried to slit her whole stomach open, absolutely nothing happened. Maybe knife didn't go deep enough or what. So guess what? They put her on the stretcher and they take her back to the hospital. And I bet some people had some words for this. She spends her time in the hospital bed for a little bit. And I think within a couple days, they took her to county. She had really no answers for what she did. It was pretty obvious why she did it. Now, do you guys remember when I told you that she left a note at the scene of the crime that they found? Oh my God, Bruce was supposed to pick up his son that day. Can you imagine thinking you're coming to pick up your son and take him back home to your brand new family and showing up and there's crime scene tape everywhere because Caroline Young couldn't get it the together? So the note that she left for Bruce the note said something about like, I'm a vengeful spirit and like, I will haunt you forever, or I will take out my rage on this world. It was something like that, okay? Oh my God. So afterwards, Caroline was given the death sentence for such an evil and selfish act. But she never made it because she ended up dying in 2005 while on death row of kidney failure. Guys, and also, how crazy is it was kidney failure? She probably ruptured something and then died slowly over a couple years. Yo, can I ask you guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, what is that story to you? Okay, I'm in shock. Dude, I know. I'm sorry, guys. Okay.